Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I'm joined by Jeremy Meadowcroft. Welcome, Jeremy.
Good afternoon. Nice to be here.
Well, I am very keen to share your why and why you do what you do, because a lot of people don't know enough about what you do, and they often stop at the garden gate, and that will become a little bit more clear as we go a bit further into this and understand what that means. So why don't you just tell us what it is you spend most of your time doing?
Normally, trying to help people to find the money that they need to grow or start their business. And often that's because they've either come from somebody that said no to that request, so they've been declined, or that they just don't know where to go and what's available and what's out there. So it's good because it's trying to help people on a much wider scale than just a niche product or service.
So you're mainly talking about SME here?
Yeah, founders, startups, they can be charities, CICs, it gets as complex as you want, but essentially people are trying to start or grow a business that requires some funding, and they are either struggling to find out where to go, or they don't know where to go, or they don't know some of the things that are actually available to them.
And is it a case of you just don't know what you don't know?
I think so. The danger is there's some myths out there, and there's some deeply held perceptions. And we've seen a big change in the last, 10 years. So if you're under 30, you're probably looking to get a decision on a mobile tablet. You're not dressing up smart, making an appointment to go and see the bank manager with your cap in hand and hoping to impress him or her. And that's a change because people used to do it that way. Now people are using technology, they're using much more platform-based, forum-based information, sourcing information from people who've maybe been through that path, but their business isn't the same as the person they're listening to. So you can very easily get sort of some myths or some misinformation out there. So again, it's where do you go to get somebody that understands all of those different opportunities?
And that's my question right back to you. Where do you go?
Well, I'm an ex-bank manager, so I think I'm very experienced in lending, and I think I know a lot. But actually, I came out of banking after 27 years with one employer, somewhat institutionalized, and that's really when my sort of career as it is now took off, because I spent time in the public sector. I lent money for a non-profit lender. I lent the government's money, who only lend to people that get declined by banks. So I had to come out of banking to learn about the other types of sources available. I worked in public sector along the line with grant monies and got into a little bit of angel investing. So when you've actually done those roles and actually, helped the clients, actually delivered the products, made the decisions on the loans I'm helping with, or the debt, or the grant, or the equity, it really does give you an insight that you cannot have that experience unless you've actually walked that walk. So I say I've truly walked the walk. I've been a branch manager. I've been a decision maker on commercial lending for 12 years for businesses. But I've also hosted equity investment pitch days, and I've lent non-profit government-driven funding that nobody knows even exists to help people grow their businesses.
So how would they go about finding this information?
Well, there really is a huge amount of free resource information out there through the public sector, but organisations that people don't really understand. And I'm talking about things like British Chamber of Commerce. There's Chamber of Commerces all around the world, but people sort of say, yeah, is that a company? Is that the council? Is that a non-profit? They don't quite know unless they go and find out. The LEP, the LEPs, as we know across the country, again, a pseudo division of a government-supported programme to give information, resource, knowledge, support, and sometimes money as well in terms of programmes to help And then obviously there's councils. The councils have their own commercial side and information. Then you've got people like brokers who are probably ex-bankers and probably dealing with a range of lenders. There's just lots of different places out there, but you might get a different answer from different people. And if they're parts of the jigsaw, then my challenge is who understands the whole jigsaw? Because you rarely get somebody that's done their time in each of those sectors. And that's perhaps, the benefit of what I've learned over the last, 33 years.
So how do you filter out the noise to understanding that who you're going to is the right person and you're getting the right type of advice?
Well, it's really hard. I have a network of people, and I'm not just charging for placing loans. I'm giving workshops or talking at events, funding events, and I might do, 15 minutes on alternatives to traditional bank lending. I might be explaining to somebody why their secured loan or unsecured loan will never get agreed by a bank in its current format. I might be talking about the way that you present your request or your pitch to a lender or an investor. And I might be showing you how and where different solutions have different appetites. So your particular case, because you're pre-revenue or because you're early stage revenue or you've only just reached validation, you won't get, that person will help you, but this person will. So it's horses for courses. And if you go to somebody who's a very experienced bank manager and they say no, they're saying no about bank debt funding. They're not saying no, your business is a failure. They're just saying it's not right for our products and services. So where do you go? Well, I'd like to think that my network is full of people who say, well, Jeremy's a good, somebody called me the other day, friend in finance. He's not going to charge you X, Y, Z to give you this product. He's going to show you 2 or 3 solutions. And often the answer is actually what I call a blended solution, and it's part of one product and part of another. And that really is often a real key to help people get to what they need and what they want to grow their businesses.
And a lot of people might be thinking, well, I'm okay where I am with my business. I don't need to get any lending. What difference could it make to sort of take that investment on board to propel the business?
If you don't need any money to grow, absolutely brilliant. Don't. It's better if you don't. But normally there's an opportunity or there's a threat or there's something where more finance would make you more efficient. It would either get that big deal, it would either duplicate the or grow the amount of profit you're making, or it might buy out a competitor or buy a machine or something or other. There's normally some reason why having this extra thing would be of benefit. So all borrowing is not a bad thing. You would only borrow if it's a good opportunity to take advantage of. But in effect, by looking at that as an opportunity to say, right, what will that get me? It's going to be why do you want either the knowledge that you're gaining from it, the resource you're gaining from it, or the actual money to do what that is, whether it's creating more jobs or bigger premises or whatever. There's loads of different reasons, and often a request is a multiple of those, so that they're wanting to expand, they're wanting to pay something off, they're wanting to grow something, and they're wanting to develop some idea. And again, because there's a multiple of reasons, again, it may or may not suit one lender to another.
And we're talking about the why, and the why for, you just said, why do they need that lending? Going back and scaling back right to the core of the why of that particular business, how many businesses do you work with that don't really understand why they're operating?
Well, it would sound critical to say that they don't understand the why. They'll have a vision, they'll have an objective, something they enjoy, or why they started the enterprise in the first place. But understanding what they need to get to where they think they want to go often is up for discussion, let's say. So I'll often have a client who thinks that they need £250,000, and they don't. What they need is 60,000. So being knocked back for 250,000 is not somebody saying your business is wrong, your proposition is wrong. It's them saying, we're not going to lend you that amount because we don't think you need that. And I'll break that down and show that maybe what you need is 60,000 for the first 9 months, and then you'll need another 140 at stage 2. Or sometimes the fact that they don't need to borrow at all. or that sometimes what they think they need to borrow, actually they don't. What they need to do is raise half of that and get some other funding from somewhere else that isn't always debt funding. And that's where we get into the world of sort of grant funding, which is contributory. So, again, people's lending request, I always listen to what they say, but it's not usually what they actually need or want to get to their objective.
And how accessible is grant funding to small, medium enterprises?
Well, I mean, it's a world of myths and cloaks and shadows, to some degree. People will often say to me, what's available? What can I get? And I turn that completely on its head and say, you tell me why you're deserving of some grant funding. Because grants, no matter what area of the country you're in, no matter what country you're in the world, are going to be there to drive behaviours that add value to society, add value to the economy, typically creating jobs. So if you're not meeting those objectives, then there's probably no funding for you. And the quicker you understand that, the better. But for people to say, oh, my mate got a grant of 30,000, how do I get that? You're coming at it from the wrong angle. So what it'll be is, I'm trying to grow this business, and in doing so, we will expand the workforce. We'll be taking people off the unemployment queue, creating jobs that they will then spend money in the local economies. Well, to do that, then, there's probably some contributory money available to help you do that. It's not all of it, and it won't be none of it, but it'll be some of it. If you're buying a machine that's going to increase capacity, there'll be a grant for some of that money. So often it's a percentage. And I come back to what I said before about a blended solution. Right, well, what we might find is if we paint the picture, explain the why, explain the objective, and what the wider benefits to society, not just your profit, bottom line, then there might be some money from a grant and some smaller amount for debt funding that will give you the solution you need. And that's when the light bulb moment comes on. People say, wow, now I understand.
So I mentioned earlier about stopping at the garden gate, and that's something that you explain is a common situation. What does it mean?
I don't think people do it intentionally, but we live in a FCA regulated world, and personal products, financial products, as well as commercial financial products, mortgage financial products, they've all got very clear limitations. I mean, now I see people advertising on social media things that you cannot do in the FCA. You can't advertise lending. You can't say, come and get a loan. It breaches FCA. You can't market certain products. But social media doesn't have these limitations. So people, institutions, lenders, organisations are very keen to make sure they're compliant, and so they should be. What that means is they often won't discuss other sectors, products and services, because it's not their place, they're not experts in it, they're frightened of saying the wrong thing, and they don't know much about it. So better to say, that's where I stop, at the garden gate. You'll need to go and find a grant or another lender or somebody that will say yes. And in my day in the bank, I've met people and would say, you might want to try this organisation or that organisation. Do you know Derek's telephone number? Would you like Karen's phone number? Would you like so-and-so's business card? And if you're a friend, you're introducing them. You're not saying it's a solution. You're not talking about the product. And I think we need to see more and more of that, because certainly in West Yorkshire, we've got a fantastic financial network of what I believe is really good financial knowledgeable people who are great in their sectors. They're really open to helping each other. And I enjoy that people know me and will refer me, and vice versa, I will refer them. And there's no chalkboard of scores or commission or money passing hands. It's really genuinely saying, I'll introduce you to Alan because he will open the door and show you some of these grants, or I'll introduce you to Kevin who will show you this. And together, I think that's really valuable. But we must have that sort of collaborative way, because the product might be a collaboration, might be a blended solution, but it might be a collaboration of skill sets. And people in the councils and the LEPs, they know me. And it's nice to be able to refer to and from each other in that manner, because at the end of the day, the client is the centre of our objective, and we should be doing the right thing for the client.
And how long have you been doing this? I mean, you mentioned sort of decades, but have you literally been working in this field always?
I worked in retail banking for 16 years, and I got to be a branch manager, and that was the proudest day of my life. My son was born 2 weeks after I got the keys to my own branch. I had 2 branches, 13 staff, very stressful. And after 3 years, I then went into business. So to answer your question, I've been in business banking 12 years and 5 years in public sector and equity. So really 16 years in retail, 17 years in business. And it's getting the grey hair. And unfortunately, I see real value in my grey hair because, as I say, I've sat behind that desk and I've made the decisions on who to lend to and who not. I've been out and sat on enough potato sacks. I've done enough tours of businesses and read the whiteboards, and I love that. Absolutely love it. But you've got to have done the time. And I do see some people who are saying that they understand this sector, they're experts, and I'm thinking you can't have been doing that job very long, or you've clearly not worked for this type of lender or that type of lender. So I do enjoy helping and sharing that knowledge with people, because that's really what it's all about.
And what is it about for you?
Well, I mean, when you go the extra mile, we used to say in banking, it's great customer service and memorable, and people will come back and they'll buy more products. But for me, it's getting a result where somebody else sort of gave up. So when a client comes to me and says, I've been referred to you because my bank have turned me down for this loan, and I will question them, and pretty much they've taken that rejection very personally. They've taken it as an assault on their business case, that their business is a failure. And I'll actually defend the bank and say, no, it's not that. It's just the fact that your request doesn't meet responsible lending criteria. It doesn't meet the FCA regulations. But what they haven't told you is there is somebody else that will. There is an organisation that will take a social impact view and say, but hang on, if you succeed, society succeeds. If you succeed, we create some jobs. So there is another step. It just disappoints me when somebody will have just said, no, there's the front door, goodbye, cheerio, when it could have so easily, if they knew a bit more, they could have referred to somebody else. So for me, it's about going the extra mile where somebody hasn't, to get that client what they want. And that makes my heart sing, really.
And give me an example of some of the solutions that you provided for people in the past and what that's then gone on to achieve.
Well, we used to do news stories, and I mean, the way it is now, you pretty much either pay for that news story or you self-publish it. So again, we don't see great journalistic pieces about them, but many times I would have customers who would come with that story that they had been declined by their bank because it was perhaps an unsecured lend. And the banks used to do a lot more unsecured lending. Since 2008, they don't do so much. And therefore, it's just the credit appetite to the economic and social climate that we're in, that banks can't lend any more than that because it's deemed irresponsible lending. But we could find social impact lenders, we could find a bit of grant money, we could find even some equity investment. By giving them that solution, they've then come back to me a year later and said, and now I want to borrow some more money. And I've said, but hang on a minute, the loan that we gave you has actually proved you to be more profitable. You are now a better case for your bank. Let's walk you back down to the bank. And they've said no, because they remember the loyalty that the bank said no and you said yes. And I'm saying, but hang on a minute, I'm referring you back to the bank if that's the best deal. So again, it's always doing the right thing by the client. All right, a year ago, you weren't right to fit a responsible lending case. You came to an alternative lender and we provided you. But now your business is stronger, you've got more of a track record, you've got a proven profitability and a proven debt serviceability. You will now meet their criteria. Would you like me to handhold you and introduce you to the relationship manager or to the person? And they've said, really? So, sometimes it goes full circle. I can take clients from the banks and then be handing them back to the banks. Sometimes I can be taking them from an angel investor to a bank or bank to an angel investor. It really is a mix, but it's, again, always doing the right thing for the client at the right stage that they're at. And that's very useful for the clients to get the best possible solution, not just the only one.
Moving on to what you do sort of in other parts of your life and how that sort of always looking after other people is something that's quite important for you to sort of bring that into all strands of your living?
Yeah, it is really. I coach children's football, and I got into it when my son was 5, and I've been coaching for 15 years. I then became chairman of the club, and I you end up taking on multiple roles. I mentor grassroots organisations for North Yorkshire sports because, again, I see voluntary run grassroots sports clubs like small businesses. They've got people with great intentions, maybe not the skill set, and they're trying to do something, whether it's providing a service for the community or progressing an interest, or they're struggling with some kind of objective they're trying to do, delivering more, staying alive, at the minute with money as it is. So I work for North Yorkshire Sports, and I treat them like an organisation. I've been dealing with a bowling club. I've been dealing with a disability football club. I've been dealing with a one-man organisation that was so great he needed to be a 10-man organisation. But it's doing that. It's thinking, well, what lessons have I learned along the way that I can share with you? And what more can I learn? Because there's some brilliant people out there who just with a bit of mentoring and a bit of guiding, you can get them through the problem that they see as a mountain, and moving them on so that next time they've got some tools how to solve the problem next time, not just on their own, but so that I'm not a crutch. And that's really important to me as well. When I'm coaching football and children, you see that development like with any child, whether it's learning the piano, you see that sort of guidance as opposed to telling. And it's the same with organisations, and it's the same with businesses. So I do enjoy that. I do like doing that. And I do see the sort of removing of barriers to help people just progress, because they've got all the resource, they've got the energy, they've got the direction. They just need some of the barriers taken out of their way.
And something that fascinates me is how many sportsmen Yorkshire produces. Top level sportsmen. And I don't know what that's about. But I remember back in the 2012 Olympics, because I was a games maker there, that there were so many Olympic medals coming from Yorkshire.
Well, I think it's probably a bit of Yorkshire grit, but we've got, dare I say it, we've potentially got Leeds being the second Yorkshire football team to get into the Premiership, hopefully this next couple of weeks. So we're getting back on the map, and I just think we're more characterful county, aren't we? So we should have some of the best sports people performing on the best stage. I think that's right.
So sports and business often go hand in hand with the analogies that you can make. And you talk about grit, you talk about perseverance in terms of resilience and moving forward. How much do you take sport into your business?
Probably a bit of a competitive edge, really. I used to say when I was at primary school, I used to walk down the road to school, and if someone was walking on the opposite side, I would try and get to the lamppost before them, or try and get to the end of the street. I'm still that competitive now, So I think competition is a really good thing. And when people talk about stress, I always say, yeah, but is it good stress or bad stress? Because good stress is like sport and competition. You are putting yourself in a stressful situation to outwit and see if you can beat your opponent. That's good stress. That's not bad stress. Bad stress is a killer. Good stress it drives you on and elevates you to different levels. So there's definitely a connection here between sport, competition, team sports versus solo sports, team player versus solo player, that sort of thing in business. And I see many of the same attributes in people that have the guts to start their own business, have the desire to try and achieve this objective they've got, and the desire to be competitive and win. And I love that. Sometimes, like in all walks of life, we need a helping hand. We need a supporter. We need someone to, shake the stick every now and again, and we need somebody to be behind us and know they've got our back.
And also to know that failing's not always a bad thing.
Absolutely. I mean, there's many famous cliches and quotes about learning more from losing than there is from winning, but it's how you adapt to it, what you take on board, and how you make yourself stronger for the next event. And we're seeing a lot of talk about resilience at the minute with COVID-19, of course, and we're seeing a lot of different people's interpretation of that word, either in their personal lives or mental resilience or commercial resilience. But you're right, it's the way that people are adapting, taking it happening, learning from it and moving forward and hopefully being stronger for the next time.
And you talked about earlier the parts of the jigsaw. What parts of the jigsaw are required for the lending?
Oh, wow. I'll often see a good business badly presented, or I'll see what I would call a pitch, like the request, fixated on one outcome, and that will turn off the wrong audience. So if people watch Dragon's Den and think that that is the way you talk to investors, you're going to get declined. And in that field, you've really only got one chance. If you make an appointment with your bank manager or manageress and you go and pitch to them and they've seen your business plan, you've probably only got one pitch, one attempt, bite at the cherry. So with a lot of these things, you want to get that right, because you can't say, cut, edit, can I come back tomorrow and try again? And it's not just about a performance. It's not about, the song and the dance. It is about the content. But as a lender, I see business plans that aren't written by the applicants. I see cliches used by people trying to impress me rather than thinking about what they're actually saying. I see too many quotes about EBITDA and people who don't understand what EBITDA is, but they saw it on Dragon's Den last night, so they think that's important. Yeah. And whereas I'll just talk common sense and say, but your net profit here was this. How is that going to? So let's just keep it simple. But the messaging is really important that you get that right, because you might only have one chance to make a good impression and you don't want to burn it. Parts to all that component are being able to have substance in your request, to be able to communicate it clearly and succinctly, not in a 112-page document or in a song and a dance routine. It's got to be a combination of those things, really.
I love that. I think that's really good advice in terms of probably preparing yourself, but not over preparing, understanding who you're delivering that information to, but fundamentally it's who's going to benefit from the lending and why. It comes back to the why again. In terms of what you're doing, Jeremy, in terms of how you're helping people, do people come to you as a last resort, or do they come to you soon enough? Yeah,
it's a good question. Probably a bit of everything, but I'd like to think that rather than that my name be, we're saying in lending, we don't want to be a lender of last resort. But to some degree, it depends on where they started on that journey of their request, because funding often takes longer than people realise. Certainly does in the world of equity investing. You on average, you probably spend about 6 months before you find the right investment. With a loan, you're probably thinking a lender should take about a week to make a decision, that sort of thing. But in terms of getting the message right and how you're going to approach to get the answer that you want, it can be a multiple. It really can. And go back to what I said before again. If you're talking to the right audience, then you get your message according for that audience. It should be direct. But if it gets convoluted and distracted, then they're just going to say, I don't understand it.
So why do you do all of this? What drives you?
Well, I mean, combination of a number of things, and that is that people who are stopping at that garden gate aren't sharing the knowledge that they've got, or not taking the time to learn other people's industries. And it only takes a little bit to learn. I mean, aren't you interested? I am. And I find it fascinating that my friend over here does a different type of funding to me. I find it fascinating that this new grant is to do X, Y, and Z. I find it fascinating that we're getting more and more young founders looking at equity finance. I mean, wow, how brave are they? I just find the whole area fascinating. And if you're fascinating, you're interested in it. And the great Jim Rohn said, if you're passionate about something, learn about it, become a student of it, and teach it. Because if you're on purpose with it, you're naturally interested, and therefore you'll naturally go and find that bit of information, not doing it like homework. And then you're teaching it in terms of, people will say to me, can you do a talk on the funding landscape? And that's why I deliver the workshops that I do for the LEP, because they're saying to me, we've got people here who want to understand what kind of finance to go for. you understand the landscape. Can you explain the differences between them? And I love it because I'm just delivering knowledge to people, getting them ready to prep. So, yeah, it just ticks a lot of boxes and I just really enjoy it.
Well, I couldn't tell. The passion was coming out. I think I've ever had someone so enthusiastic about finance and quote Jim Rohn in the same space. So that was a first.
Well, I could quote Jim Rohn a lot more. I tried to limit it to one quote per per conversation, but yeah. He's in my car. I have a 6 CD set in my car, and it's just always on every other day.
Yeah, well, he's definitely the founder of a lot of the personal development that people write about today. He was definitely at the forefront. It's a shame he's not around.
The one quote I live by is a quote by Calvin Coolidge, who was an ex-US president, and his quote is about persistence, and that persistence will always win the day over knowledge, over education, and I love that sort of persistence or sort of resilience. Is about keeping going. But I was lucky enough to live and work in America for a year, and I was driving around, and I literally stumbled across this brown sign that said Calvin Coolidge's homestead. And I could not believe it. I didn't even know he's from Vermont, and I was on the border between New Hampshire and Vermont. And I stumbled over this homestead where his house is and was. And I walked in, and as I walked in, the plaque on the wall in relief was the persistence quote by Calvin Coolidge. And it's my favourite. It's what I live by. I say it's going on my headstone. So yeah, that's Calvin Coolidge and Jim Rohn. They're the two. Go and look them up.
Well, I think that's a great place to sort of bring this to a close. But I really, really value your insight in the lending world and understanding that persistence is the key for people to keep going and understand what it is they need, not why they need it, but it is actually more a case of the what as well. Usually I focus on the why, and that is crucial, but sometimes they get the what and the how wrong too. So that they're all key questions to be asking. So thank you for sharing those. Have you got a final, before I say that, how could people get in touch with you?
Well, LinkedIn these days, there's not many Jeremy Meadowcrofts about, but you can find me there. Or my website is horizon-8.com, so people can find me there. And I just explain a little bit about what I do, and my contact details are all on there. And it'd be nice to chat with anybody that needs some help. And
why Horizon-8? What's that about?
Oh, it's too long a story, but essentially Horizon is about the funding landscape, the horizon being on the landscape, and it was that was the first talk I got asked to give, and I then embarked on my first ever public speaking, which I then did 24 presentations in 24 months, and that sort of elevated what I do on a much wider scale. And people said, wow, you need to get him in to talk about the funding landscape, because he doesn't talk just like a banker, he doesn't talk just like an investor, he doesn't talk just like the grants team. He talks about all of them. And so that's where really Horizon came from. Can we see the broader picture?
I love that, the broader picture. That will probably be the title of the podcast, because you've talked about painting the picture and now you're talking about the broader picture, which is brilliant. So have you got a final message for the audience, please, Jeremy?
Just that in difficult times, keep your wits about you, keep your chin up. Remember, persistence will always win the day. And if you can't see the solution right in front of you, just try and think broader. Who do you know in not just your network, but who in your network may have another network and another network? The answer's normally out there, and people generally don't refer people they don't like. So, be nice to each other, try and help each other first, and let's try and share that knowledge around the circle so that everybody benefits. Just got to try and find the right people.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.